Christian,
Do
how
we
are you?
know where,
May not have.
do we know whether or not Mr. With Jacob is joining?
Um, the week before the pilot in the spring, the chief sent 3 cars from,
Check with Jacob, see what he's up to.
I just have a limited service where I am, so I just have to be audio only. Otherwise, it'll kick me off again.
Oh, okay. And Rob, can you hear us?
I'm gonna let you do your thing and send some emails before the workforce housing, which is what I was encouraged to attend
Oh, okay.
for.
Bob's in the room. Let me text him.
Who is SHV 2025?
It's Sage.
Oh, it's Sage, okay. Is Ginny dialing in?
What did she say? I'm on, but can't seem to be heard.
Do you see Jeannie? Sage? Rootless? Yeah, on the, no.
She just got it.
She should be coming in now.
Awesome.
Hi.
Oh, there
And
you are.
Jimmy.
All
Hello.
right, thank you for joining, Jeannie.
Yeah, I was on. I clicked on the link that you had sent me in the email, but it didn't. I could see and hear you guys, but you couldn't see or hear me.
I had the
Alright.
same. I had the same thing until I was promoted to a panelist.
Uh-huh.
No worries. Okay. I don't know about Jacob. He doesn't seem to pick up. I just texted him, but I think we have a quorum, so we should probably get going. If that's
Okay.
okay with you, Michelle, you're gonna, and I know we have Rob in the room, and thank you, thank you to Michael Anderson who made the journey down to Village Hall. Sorry, we couldn't be there. Over to you, Michelle.
Yes. Michael, can you hear us?
Yes, very well.
Very good. Okay. So the first order of business is a motion to approve the minutes of our long October 17 Planning Commission meeting, which you remember focused on workforce housing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Anybody opposed?
Yeah, no, it's all good. Thank you. Great
Okay.
job, Jolie, as always.
All right, good. The second order of business is the public safety wireless tower.
Michelle, should we start with the Pledge of Allegiance first? We forgot.
Oh, yes, you're right. Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic,
and the republic for which it stands,
One
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder, Michael. So the next order of business is an update on the public safety wireless tower. I've been speaking to Diamond Communication. They are finishing up the process of bidding out the construction of the tower itself. They should make a decision next week on which contractor to utilize. Once they have that, they can finalize their permit application. Most of the application is already with Chris Talbot, but not all of it. Once they have decided upon a builder, they need some certificate of insurance, etc., to finalize the building permit application. It should happen in the next week or two. And then Chris Talbot can finalize his review and issue a building permit. Meanwhile, I have spoken with them by email over the day, and some of you were copied on it. They will pour the foundation this winter. They can pour even when it's cold. And then when the tower itself arrives mid-February, they'll erect it right away. Meanwhile, they are well advanced with Verizon Telecommunication, and they think they can sign with Verizon before the end of this year, so in the next 25 days, and get them up in the tower in May, just before the summer season starts. With AT&T, they think it will be probably at the end of 2026. And with T-Mobile, it's more complicated because, as you remember, they may consider another solution, which is the nodes. So we'll see when T-Mobile decides and what they do. And I suspect they'll probably end up doing a cocktail of both getting on the tower and building some nodes where needed. So that's the updates on the wireless tower. Any questions?
So just to sum up, what I think we all heard is that tower will be up before the next season with Verizon on it, sounds like, and only Verizon on it.
That's correct.
Then 2026, hopefully you'll have AT&T, and then at some point T-Mobile once they ferret out what they want to do.
That's how it works. Yeah, it's disappointing, but that's how it works. Yes.
Any update on the two other town towers? Did any one of us know?
Nope.
Michelle, it'd be great to sort of, if there is any way to ferret out, maybe through Janice Scherer or anyone.
I've
where they
tried.
are.
I've
You've
tried, but it's very difficult to get a straight answer. I'll try again.
I mean, Len Zanatti has a direct line with her. Maybe she could find who's the project pilot for them.
There's no project pilot. I tried to identify such pilot many times. She said it's the whole, apparently everybody's involved and not involved, which is why they're so late. Yeah, she's probably the best person to ask the question again, though.
So as a reminder, I guess, for the public listening at home, this video, there's one town cell tower supposed to go up at the transfer station on North Sea Road, and the other one by Oakland Docks on the bay, which would be formidable for wave propagation throughout the whole community. Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Jeannie, you're next on the agenda.
Yes, I'm pleased to announce that we did have another meeting this past Tuesday, and it was very productive. We still continue to brainstorm on funding ideas to kickstart the initial website, including reaching out to Discover Long Island, along with some other ideas that's still in the works. And then Trustees Stevenson and Coburn had met with the various cultural organizations to determine the best way to leverage the resources and coordinate messaging of events throughout the shoulder season in particular. I plan to send out a meeting invite so that we can keep up the momentum to have another meeting prior to the major holidays hitting. And hopefully we'll be able to have some solid plans in place next year. But funding continues to be the gating factor. And I think Roy also said he was going to talk to the mayor about some other ideas. That's all I have.
Jeannie, just a question. I spoke to Roy earlier this week on the funding part, and one of the things we were discussing, and I said that I'd relay with you, he had some ideas for raising some money. It doesn't necessarily have to be a golf tournament as we discussed, but it could be something else whereby he was thinking that he could invite for a cocktail reception with maybe $200 a ticket, 100 people over at Shinnecock Clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
That could raise, $20,000. Would be a good way to start. We could then do a tournament somewhere, later in the summer, one of the clubs. And I think, because I know you guys have been meeting and having a lot of conversation, and it's always that gating factor, as you put it so well. And
yeah, no, I can reach out to him. He didn't really, we talked about the golf thing, not at this meeting, but it has been brought up in the past. I think he was looking to get funding from the USGA, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen.
I didn't think
And
so.
And I think Rob also had another idea, still too early to share. But yes, I can reach out and see if we can get, the golf seems to be the easiest thing to get off the ground in many ways.
Right. I mean, I think that's where you could have the biggest impact, Jeannie, is to, to sort of pivot and sort of focus on that asset raise,
Yep.
the group, while the group is working on other things. I think that's really, it's the blocking thing. So if we could
Yep.
get,
The funding.
and then the next question is, where does the funding go? Is it a 501c3? Where does it go?
Well, we had originally talked about just being a subcommittee of the Chamber of Commerce. And again, the Chamber of Commerce, Bessem did not attend this last two meetings. So I think we need to figure out how we're going to maybe work more closely together. But the meeting that they had with the cultural organizations apparently is very positive. There's already a lot of coordination and cooperation with the various teams. So potentially, we can get this off the ground as long as we have that initial seeding money.
Okay. I think Rob is in the room with Mike Anderson in Village Hall. Rob, do you want to add anything to this? That'd be
Thanks,
super
Christian.
helpful. Thank you for that.
Not too much. Jeannie's done a good job, but she alluded to, I have one and maybe a second version of the same idea of approaching basically some interested parties who have deep pockets to see if we could get a personal, at least challenge grant to start some of the funding. I'll just add a little color to what Jeannie said about the cultural organizations. They do already coordinate with with something called HAN, the Hamptons Arts Network. It's been around, I think, for about 8 years, and I wasn't clear exactly how effective it is. They all spoke highly of it, but in the past few years, the Southampton Village organizations that are members of HAN have really created their own kind of buddy system and dialogue, either one-off, they even meet from time to time as a group. The thesis here is, as Jeannie alluded to, that we have such an amazing and impressive collection, both breadth and variety of cultural institutions here. And we're talking about, just to be clear, the History Museum, the Peter Marino Foundation, Southampton Arts Center, Cultural Center, Veterans Hall, some of the things that happen there independently, the library, the movie theater, and the Southampton African American Museum, which of course includes the Paris Concert House. In terms of the nexus of history and culture and arts, it's pretty impressive. They're all doing some different degrees, but doing pretty well in terms of both their funding and their programming. They seem like mostly very stable organizations. And they have already begun some coordination, as Jeannie alluded to, and they're open to the idea of coordinating more. So the idea would be to create, not every weekend, but on either selected weekends or based on just a survey of the programming that's coming up, how can we align certain events and message off of them to just either attract weekend residents who don't normally come out in January to come out for a weekend, or bring their friends, or get some day traffic from either the city or Mid-Island. So the consensus is that the village sells itself in the summer, the beaches and the activity and the hype, the restaurants, all of that does a pretty good job. So we're looking for things that will give more stability and more excuses for messaging by us, and therefore visits from people in the off season. And they were very, as Jeannie indicated, they were very willing partners, and glad to hear about this initiative. I think the next steps, I'll just add in that, to me, the next steps are finding some initial foothold on funding, and I think Jeannie and Eldon are working on maybe a slightly more modest or startup version of a first year or two budget. They've done a great job putting together kind of I don't want to demean it, but an aspirational budget, or if money weren't an option, how would we kick off the first couple of years? That budget exists. So I think we ought to have a version of that budget that says, what if we start a little more on a shoestring with based on existing assets, but spend the money to develop a good website and So I think getting that budget done and a little bit of a narrative that we can share with people, to me, then the next step would be organizing a meeting after the next committee meeting, but sometime perhaps in January, with whoever from the cultural organizations wanted to come, a good handful of representative and influential business leaders, and have a roundtable discussion and Jeannie, I think left out, but not criticism, that we've also looked at a couple of websites that were interesting to us, that had some functionality and attractiveness to be models, at least, for what we're doing. And I think Amy Berman, in particular, had some ideas and was going to do some sleuthing on one in particular. So if we can put that all together in a 5 to 10 page package and then sit down with a group and get some input in January, feels to me like we're heading in the right direction. And I'm just repeat what everyone said: money is the gating fact. Getting the right budget to start and then finding the funding to support that is the gating factor. And I would also just say, and your group's a great one to say it to, we have some ideas of our own, but we either need someone who's semi-retired and has some skills in this area and a very strong interest in the village to kind of step forward and be not a volunteer, but a sort of part-time and a little sweat equity type person to help us start this, or we need maybe someone young committed to doing this full-time, and maybe it starts part-time or not, but if we get everything done that we want to get done, it's the real key here is not even the tools. It's getting someone who's enthusiastic and focused and organized, who can really run this content, work alongside Nancy Kane to get messaging out, both to people directly through social media and to the Southampton Press, but also regional media, to help drive the visits, to get the traction from what we're doing. So that's all I have to add, but thank you for asking. Any questions?
Yeah, Rob. So the idea, just on the money raise.
Yeah.
Why not already start thinking about trying to put an event together, modest event, 100 people?
Yep.
There was a boy's idea, at Shinnecock at some point, $200.
I think that's fine. Of course, look, I'm a liaison. I understand that initiative was happening, and Roy was helping shepherd that. I do think it's a good idea. I think there's no reason to wait on doing something like that. I agree.
So I mean, for Jeannie, who's our planning commission person, working with you guys on it, I think that would be a great focus if it's just to hustle everybody to just, get the reservation done, get the thing done, and just move it along.
Yeah, I agree. I will just add on the fundraising front, the cultural organizations made it pretty clear they don't kind of have deep pockets or excess marketing dollars. If we are successful on this and we can prove that we're helping drive a lot of awareness, we might over time be able to get them to loosen up a little bit or make some contributions, but I don't think it's a productive way to start out. And the idea of going sort of hat in hand the way the chamber does to businesses and asking people to sign up or give something, I think it's not impossible. But I think a better way to get them started initially would be to invite those business leaders to an event like this golf outing, make it a little more social, a little more personal for them, and then, over time maybe develop some funding from businesses as well. One other thing just to throw in here, and he didn't say not to mention this, but John Betts at Shippey's separately has been working on something, I guess, with some technology people of his own, which is essentially, think of it like, I hate to use this word, but like a mall directory, but interactive with a touch screen. And that would, I think he started off by saying, their staff gets so many questions from people who come into the restaurant, where can we go, what can we do, where do we find this? So he's been sort of working on putting that together to pilot in his restaurant. And he expressed a real willingness, as that develops, to basically license that to other businesses or other locations in the village. To me, and I know the mayor is working, I guess, on an app, which is a walking tour, which we should pull into this initiative. But it'd be interesting to have a kiosk with a weatherproof touchscreen in front of Village Hall, and maybe a few other locations in the village. That's pretty aspirational, but I think it's important to mention John's initiative because A, to me it's very interesting, and B, he's expressed a willingness to share this and leverage it for the benefit of the village. If I were him, I'd want some reasonable licensing fees just to recoup some costs, and I think he would keep that reasonable. But that would certainly be an important part of the puzzle if it were to come to fruition.
Michelle, do we want to move on?
Yes.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, well, thank you, Jeannie, and thank you, Rob. Next subject is the water tank project updates, but Jacob is not with us. Jacob, are you there?
No, he's not. He texted me. He's actually traveling. He can't be on a computer screen.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can give a quick update. We had a call earlier this week with SCWA, Suffolk County Water Authority. Basically, where we are is that we need an easement from the town in order to do this project on the North Big East site owned by the village. SCWA approached one party within the town administration who had some concern on the visuals. So they went back and are having conversation now with the right party, who's the financial planner in the town, provided some visuals, and they will be talking to the town board in an exec session in early December to feel out the town board's view on getting and giving the village this easement that is required. So whilst the project is to be on village land, at the end of the day, we're kind of at the mercy of SCWA presenting its project in a positive light for the town, who would benefit from this 2 million gallon tank at the North Big East site, as well as the village, and articulate that it would not have any negative environmental impact or visual for the people who enjoy that particular site when they walk around the woods. So that's kind of where we are. It's this catch-22 between the town, SCWA, ourselves, with that easement that's sort of that we need to get from the town. We can't move forward without it. So that's where we are. I think by the time we meet again in whatever it is, second week of December for the planning commission, we'll have Jacob there, and he will have hopefully some progress. But there seems to be good conversation this week between SCWA, ourselves, and the town planner. So I am hopeful for some of the back channel conversations. That's all I can say at this point on behalf of Jacob.
Great. Thank you. Any questions from the public or from people in the room? No questions? Okay, great. So now we can move on to the next item, which is the Southampton Village Best Legislation Project. Christian?
Yeah. So before I have a presentation that I want to show you guys, and I know a lot of you have taken the time to look at it last night or this morning, so I thank you for those who did. And we're just going to quickly run through it. But to set the stage, we put a task force together. Rome Arnold, who is a resident who's actually on this call with us, has been super helpful to us to put this presentation together, put our thoughts together in terms of what is the vision, what is the mission. And if you remember, Rome was instrumental in the community alerting us as to this Hampton Bays project, which I will discuss in the presentation back at beginning of 22 and into 23, how relevant it was in terms of this project and how it impacted not just Hampton Bays residents, but all of the East End from here to Montauk. So I certainly want to give him a shout out and thank you for all the work he's done with me and what he's done with the Planning Commission over the last couple of years on the topic. Since then, you've heard at the last meeting that we had at the Planning Commission, the mayor saying that he had intent to have some land use best legislation in place on the books, just like the town has done, as well as many other communities on Long Island. So I've done some work, which I will present to you, and then on behalf of the Planning Commission, if you guys all agree with it, I will present it at the work session, which is to be held on the 25th of November. What we will do between now and then, and I guess I won't need to do it with Rob since he's listening to this, but we'll go to each one individual trustee to make him aware of what we'll talk about on the 25th of November and get as much input as possible. And the reason for doing it this way, as opposed to how we've done other projects, is to get input from the Board of Trustees ahead of time when we work on a piece of legislation and get their guidance ahead of time. That's especially on a subject like this, it's useful to think about it before you put a pen to paper so that we go in the right direction. So that's why we're doing it this way. So with that in mind, I'm going to share my screen and show you what we will be presenting after we discuss it with this commission to the work session on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And again, this is a draft, and we just want to quickly go through it. So let me just say what is the issue? What are we trying to solve for? And the issue is that we do have a Community Preservation Act that promotes battery energy storage system in New York State with the rise of renewable energy integration. Promoters are looking for best site throughout the state and throughout a nation. And Southampton Village is one of the few communities left on Long Island who does not have in its land use anything for the best. So our responsibility, of course, is to promote public safety, but also minimize the hazards that could, in a densely populated area, have a negative impact. Not admitting a view, politically or otherwise, of the merit of BESS at this point, but it's in a densely populated area like the 6.5 square miles of Southampton, something that the mayor has asked us to look for. So the solution is to codify land use for a BESS that is actually consistent with the Southampton Town Code, and I'll briefly talk about this quickly. What's a BESS? For you guys that don't know, but I know this group is quite familiar with it since we've been talking about this for the last couple of years, but it basically stores excess electricity from the grid or from renewable sources, whether they're offshore or through solar panels. It holds that electricity, and what's important to understand is that it holds it in a chemical energy point of view. And then it releases that stored electricity back into the grid. The important thing is we all have read and heard that there has been improvement in lithium-ion battery chemistry over time. Today, what is most prevalent in terms of technology is what's called the LFP, which is a lithium iron phosphate type of chemistry. It's an industry standard, but it has what's called a low energy density. By that, I mean they are alternative, using nickel, manganese, cobalt with producing per unit more megawatts, but the thermal, and we'll go into this, stability is a lot less reliable. In terms of new energy, or rather chemistry that people think are safer, and I'll go through some of the thermal runaways that we've seen throughout the country and right here in the town of East Hampton in a minute, but there are some new technology, and I wanted to put those out so that people understand when they say, you guys are being too dramatic about an environmental impact on the BESS. There is new technology. Yes, there is, but that doesn't eliminate the risks. These are flow batteries. What's interesting there is that the actual nodes are sitting in liquid electrolyte tanks, so it does lower fire risk, no question. Sodium ion probably wouldn't apply in this area because they're mostly used in very cold weather type situation. And then sodium sulfur, which are higher energy density, just like NMC I mentioned earlier, but they are very costly. So the conclusion is, yeah, we got technology out there to reduce the risk. It doesn't eliminate them. And of course, a promoter is going to balance profit against public safety risk as always. Any questions so far in what I've said? And by the way, I failed to mention, and I know he's on mute, but Alex has been very helpful, and I'll get to that in a minute, to help us as village planners. We've had meetings with him as well to sort of ferret out some of the zoning issues. So Alex will clearly be part of this exercise along with Rome and myself working through this. So I just wanted to give a shout out also to Alex, who's done work on this. But he hasn't seen this presentation, and his input would be useful here as well. What I want to go through right now is some repeated episode of thermal runaway. Yeah, it was a surprise for the folks in Surprise, Arizona, on the McKinnon BESS in April 2019. Look, when first responders opened the door to investigate, mixture of gas ignited, and it was a powerful explosion. First responders, four firefighters were seriously injured, and obviously the safety of a first responders is something we need to be concerned about. Another repeated episode was in Chandler, Arizona. This is a couple of years later, in April 2022, Dormant Energy Storage Facility. This is owned by a well-known public utility called AES. Again, a thermal runaway occurred. The security systems they had around with automatic sprinklers did deploy. They worked correctly, but they were unable to control the event. And certainly, I think what it demonstrates is beyond the chemistry, you can put a lot of systems in place in terms of trying to mitigate any collateral event. And it doesn't always work. This was another example of hazardous gas leak in Chandler, and an evacuation zone with more than a quarter-mile radius had to be put in place, evacuating people and closing a major freeway in Arizona. So now, let me briefly talk about the Hampton Bays proposal, and we on this commission had been talking about this one for some time, as I said earlier. So let me just quickly set the scene for those who are new at understanding this and listening to us. A firm called Rhineland Energy, based in Manhattan, 3 or 4 guys, put together a project to ask for the authorization of a 100 megawatt facilities in Hampton Bays. And I'll briefly talk about what does 100 megawatt means, just to give you a sense. A power wall at home is generally about 15 to maximum 20 megawatt. A Tesla or any other electric vehicle is roughly around 80 megawatts. Kilowatts. Kilowatts, I meant kilowatts. So let me be clear there. So if you have, say, think of an electrical vehicle battery that is 80 kilowatts, just imagine what 100 megawatts would be. So the town board did, planning board did their review. They went as far, astonishingly, to have a secret negative declaration, that meaning that it would have no significant adverse environmental impact. From our perspective, we always thought that it straddled a very critical infrastructure point because it was just supposed to be east of the canal between Highway 27 and Long Island Railroad track. And given the, albeit very remote risk, but very relevant risk, would put the entire East End for days, if that were to happen in those examples I cited earlier of a thermal runaway, in an absolute untenable position, an environmental catastrophe, if that project went on. Now, during the summer of 2023, the town board, because Hampton Bays residents were vehemently against it, put a 6 month moratorium after also we had, and I'll discuss it in a second, a fire in East Hampton on one of the best. So this Hampton-based project, thank God, has been later abandoned, despite the fact that the planning board had given it a secret negative declaration. That fire in East Hampton was on Cove Hollow Road. Um, it was in a building housing the system. It took almost 2 days to ensure the fire was fully extinguished, putting their first responders and our own, who also went there on that fire, at great risk. Road closures were done at the time, disruptions to Long Island Railroad, and it was a real concern, especially about the runoff of water contamination to put out the fire. Large volumes of water went straight into the aquifer, potentially carrying some toxic substance, another burning lithium ion component in our aquifer. So really not a cool situation in East Hampton. What also happened in the state of New York at about the same time in the summer of 2023, two other best fires took place. One in Warwick, New York. That is, for those who know where New City is, in the northwest of New York, New City, just Orange County there, Warwick. And Chaumont, New York, which is on the upper western quadrant of our state of New York. Two fires there. So Governor Hochul obviously had to think more about this 2019 act that we talked about, and she convened an interagency fire safety working group. They came out with new recommendation from a regulatory perspective for more tighter safety for these things, greater setbacks. Those are really important. We'll talk about this in a minute. Buffers from residential areas. They put more fire safety measures just beyond the regular sprinkler you would imagine in the code at the state level that every municipality needs to put in place. The town finally revised their code, which was fairly generous to the point where a unknown sponsor, Rhineland, was proposing a 100 megawatt facility in Hampton Bays that will no longer be able to be done. And this code was adopted by the board in June of this year. You know, since what happened in 2023 in East Hampton, Chaumont, Warwick, in the state of New York, again, in January of this year in Monterey, California, a very well publicized accident happened in what's called Moss Landing. That thermal runaway lasted 5 days. Toxic smoke plume, hazardous gas like hydrogen fluoride, really toxic. And they evacuated, in this instance, 8 square miles, affecting, fortunately, only 1,700 residents, but still a real disruption and close what we all know, which is the major Highway 1. So my point is, yeah, these things have been improving from the chemistry perspective, but we still today, in 2025, are witnessing issues with these with these BESS. So what did the Southampton Town Code do? They limited what they call a Tier 2 utility scale to only 5 megawatt, 1/20th of the proposal of the 100 megawatt in Hampton Bays, really limiting this in a light industrial zone with setbacks of 300 feet. Tier 1, which is between 80 and 600 kilowatts in commercial and industrial district, an acre minimum lot size. And again, I just want to emphasize, what does this mean? It's really, 80 kilowatt is the equivalent of about 6 or so battery pack that you would have in your house. In your house, in a residential area, authorizing what's called BTMs, behind the meter. These are the battery packs you put in your home, accommodating your solar panels, or simply getting cheap energy at night and releasing it when it's expensive Monday through Friday, 4 to 7 p.m. And that is becoming more and more ubiquitous, not only in our village, but in the state and nationwide. So that's how they've kitted up this new updated June 2025. It's about 20 pages. We've looked at it, reviewed it. We thought it made a lot of sense. I then went to discuss this with Alex Wallach, who was kind enough to produce a map here for the light industrial zone, which would be for the 600 to kilowatt to 5 megawatt tier 2, if one would want to put one there. So what was drawn here is the purple, which is your what we call light industrial zone around Marina Drive, that you're all familiar with, in the back of the railroad, where Powell Avenue is. And we drew a red line to define the area. If you were to use the Southampton code, which lots this could be done on, with the 300 feet required setback from residential areas. So within this red zone, you could put a BESS. Just a quick caveat, on Plant Street, there you see off of Powell, there are some non-conforming residential use, but that's been taken into account by Alex. Looking at this, what we thought is, if we were to sort of copy and paste and adopt the town code to a village situation, what we probably would recommend is to include not only residential, but also commercial zone and critical infrastructure like the railroad, which is right there, and County Road 39. Obviously, in a very remote possibility of any issue happening, you would not want to be in a situation in that light industrial zone to impede railroad traffic or to impede County Road 39. Look, we saw the zoo that went on just a couple of weeks ago with the bridge needing some repair on Highway 27, just crossing the canal, and you could imagine what could happen here. So if we did it that way, that certainly would reduce this further. So at the end of the day, the objective for the trustees to think about is to direct us as a planning commission to propose the best legislation similar to the town, adapted to the village, with stricter setbacks for the reasons I explained earlier. So I'll take a pause there and ask you guys if you have any thoughts, doing it differently, if things were unclear, if you think this is a good presentation both for the board and for the public to understand what's out there and what's going on. Any thoughts from anyone?
Yeah, Christian, Michael, on Mariner Drive there, are you saying that that's the only spot in the village where a proposal could be made for a BESS system?
Thank you. Let me go back here. So let's look at the tiering. So what we call BTM, in your house, do your business, you get a building and electrical permit, you can get up to 80 kilowatt, several battery pack in your home, do what you need to do. These are power walls, right? Tier 1 is in a commercial industrial district, so as long as you have an acre, you can do it, and having there. And just to give you, as I said, an example, it's a small EV battery up to 6 times, 7 times that size in a commercial district. It could be done. The bigger one is the tier two from 600 to 5 megawatt can only be done if you apply the town code to the village in a light industrial zone. So that light industrial zone, we only have one in our 6.5
Right.
square mile, and that's where that is.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
But my point, and it's a good one, Michael, is that today, if we were to apply the code, there still would be sites that you could actually stick one of these things. And our thought is to extend the definition of setback beyond residential, as they call in their code, also public places like churches and other akin to that, to add commercial and critical infrastructure to the setback. So 300 feet to the railroad, 300 feet to the road, 300 feet to a store. So a store, if you have Blackman, for instance, on County Road 39, if you remember where it is, it should be 300 feet away from this. It's not because people don't sleep at, in a retail store that there isn't a risk to resident during the day. And our thought is that it should be included as well.
Okay.
Michelle, Jeannie, Alex. Alex, I know you're on mute, but you were helpful in this. Share your
Thank
thoughts,
you.
Alex.
Well, Christian,
Yeah.
Christian, I have one other question. So what we're basically proposing is the first two, the tier one, and is basically okay, in your opinion, to let the residents install their battery packs and so on and so forth. But the real issue is the third one, and we're trying to make that more difficult for people or for companies to try to come in and put in the higher grade. Is that basically what you're saying here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. I agree.
And again, these Powerwall are ready today,
Right.
being installed in
Sure.
homes.
Right.
And some solar panels, etc. And that's part of the kit when you put a solar panel in
Right.
a home. Alex, do you want to jump in and share some of your thoughts?
Just that the next step really is, if there's concurrence from the village board, would be to codify this in language that could be incorporated into the zoning ordinance. And if that were done, there would have to be a public hearing. We would refer it to Suffolk County Planning Commission, and the village board would be responsible for conducting an environmental review of the legislation.
Okay. So yes, all that. But here's the rub, Alex. Honestly, when you look in detail at section, whatever it is, 332 of the Southampton Town Code, it's 20 pages. It's quite meaty, quite detailed. It's going to require a lot of work from us to do this. And the question I'm going to have for the board, whilst the mayor has asked us to look at this, and I know he did it because Suffolk County and Romaine has sort of flagged it for him to get us to look at it. The question is, in terms of priorities for all of us, you, Alex, me on the planning commission, Eileen on our legal team, it's going to be a lot of work. And I want to make sure that the board and the mayor thinks about priorities for the community, what are must-have and what are nice-to-have from a legislation point of view. And that's something these guys are going to have to debate on that dais when we present this on the 25th of November in terms of the priorities for the community. It is going to take a lot of work from our part, Alex. I mean, you know that, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's always a lot of work involved in drafting legislation. I think the village's zoning code being so much simpler than the town's is something to keep in mind. Probably a lot of that verbiage that's in the town's code is just not going to be applicable. But you're right. There's, we're going to have to prioritize, what's important, because there'll be a lot of people involved and a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a ton of work. And so I'm a little nervous given the number of priorities that we have, where this stacks. I mean, that's up to the board to decide, because it will tax a lot of us to do this. This is not just simple plug and play stuff.
Christian, we have
And you can,
Rob. Rob just came on. He has a question, I think. Or-
Yeah,
yes, please.
just one thought, and I know that typically fire safety issues are dealt with under unified codes and the New York State Code, which is really from the national code, I think at this point from 2018. But and there's some limitations. But I'm wondering if you wanted to reach out, or Alex, if you have maybe already, to either the fire marshal or to the building inspector, because there's another gating factor, but also a public safety possibility, which is that there are advanced extinguishment automatic, extinguisher systems, even for some of these more exotic chemical structures. I think that's part of what has been reviewed at the state level in light of some of the incidents that have taken place. But there might be an ability for us to require particular specialty extinguishing systems. Frankly, they're more expensive. And they localize, it in many cases does involve some chemicals, but it's a question of whether you want to throw some chemicals and get something out versus not quite enough, or water and then have excess water come in and start spreading the chemicals outside of the building or the property. So just curious as to whether it might make sense to, if we haven't already, to ask the fire marshal or the building inspector to look into what bells or whistles might we be able to require, if any, in terms of fire containment or advanced extinguishing systems for any system in the village.
Alex, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah, I don't think the discussions have gotten to that stage. Certainly, if there's a proposed legislation, I think that it would be appropriate to ask the fire marshal to weigh in. As you note, a lot of this is probably regulated under building code, so the village will have to discuss what's appropriate for our village above and beyond building code. I think primarily the focus to start with was looking from a zoning perspective about where in the village might be an appropriate location for that, and to start with that conversation.
Okay, I understand. And look, I know that a lot of this is set beyond the parameters of the village with respect to building codes and fire codes. But a fire marshal, I believe under at least common law and precedent, always has the ability, under their discretion, to recommend or require certain other things in any commercial condition. And as long as there is sort of a basis or a documentation for that being a reasonable or accepted practice. So anyway, you're right that getting the zone down and some other things is first, but before anything's proposed, it's probably worth just reaching out to them and see if they wish to have any input or have heard anything that might be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, this is you're right, and I think if we were to start drafting something, it's not going to be the 2018 what your fire codes that you're referring to. I just remember at the state level, which is your minimum standard.
Yep.
New York State regulatory recommendation post this Hochul interagency fire safety working group has come up with new stuff last year, specifically our fire safety measures. So this is really more recent stuff. I think that's also the other thing. It's not just about it being able to fire extinguish. In the code, what we'll need to think about is water containment of this chemical. I just gave you the example of what went on in East Hampton in the disaster in the aquifer there. We want to make sure that we look at what the town did. And I got to say, whilst the town had a really loosey-goosey thing before, they really buttoned this down when they did their work in 24 in what they published and adopted in June 2025. They really buttoned this down and did a pretty good job. But I would certainly argue that all of us, from an environmental perspective, would make sure that any water runoff from any fire extinguisher is really controlled from an aquifer perspective. So there's a lot more than what you just said.
Yeah. I don't know if this is part of sort of the town's code, but, I would recommend that we also make sure that our code, when one is drafted, includes a requirement for disclosure of, the exact chemistry and exact configuration of anything on site, and, provision of any specialty equipment or chemistry that might be needed to extinguish a possible fire from that facility should be loaded into that code as well.
I completely agree with you. I will tell you more. Mr. Arnold, who has read the town code, had been advocating, and certainly, unfortunately, didn't have success in his view. But what you should also do is have, which is not in the town code, and we would do it in our code if we were to codify it, is a review of the plan sponsor. In the case of the Rhineland, when you looked at it, it was a foreign corporation, 4 guys on top of a Bloomingdale's building. There was no recourse and no one to go to if there was a failure. There's no bonding in place. I mean, we would, so what I'm trying to say is we've learned a lot from the Hampton Bays. We've looked at their code. Town did a super job. We can make an even better job, but it's going to take a lot of work. And what I'm going to be asking you guys to think about on that day is when I present this to you lot on the 25th of November at the work session is, there's work here. And I want you guys to clarify, be sure that in terms of your priorities, what you want to prioritize, because you're putting so much on your council's lap.
Yep.
That
Yep.
we need to think about this carefully. And Alex's lap, and my lap, there's going to be a lot of work.
Yep.
So
Understand.
that's your call as you direct the resources of the village as trustees.
Thanks.
So thank you for listening, Rob, because you'll obviously be the expert on that Tuesday. But we will talk to the other trustees to make sure that everybody understands it and figures out, because to me, what's more important is what's nice to have and what is a must-have for the village. Is a best proposal coming into a light industrial zone tomorrow or not? I'm not totally convinced, but that's not my call. I just want to, that's going to be your call to think about. And if we are asked to go to work, we will, but there's going to be a resource that's going to be definitely sucked up. This is not an easy one.
Yep, understand.
If I may, this is Michel. Before we move on, I just want to make one point. I commend your work and the amount of thought that's gone into it, and I think it makes perfect sense to make sure that the village is protected against an oversized battery storage facility, no question. But we are, as a nation, facing tremendous issues in terms of our electric grid and in terms of the balance between renewable energy, particularly wind and solar, et cetera. So the need for this battery storage system is enormous, and the growth on a global basis is enormous, very, very rapid. So we'll see them everywhere. And the technology has improved dramatically from the days of these fire and incidents. I'm not saying they're none, but I'm saying we also need to be reasonable about it in terms of making sure that the next decades take into account increase in electric need and the increase in variable sources of generation. So it's not for a small village of 6 square miles to host such a facility.
Exactly.
But on a wider basis, in Suffolk County, et cetera, I suspect we need more and more of these facilities of different sizes to help balance the grid. That's my observation. Okay, so that's it for the Village Best Legislation Project. Thank you, Christian. And the next subject on the agenda is an update on workforce housing You remember that at the last meeting a month ago, we had many observations from many people, from the public and from trustees, etc. Meanwhile, at the Board of Trustees last night, there is a modification to the village code on the table. Rob, remind me, it was not voted yesterday, correct? It was
Correct, it's still
it's still a
adjourned.
proposal, right?
It's still adjourned, correct?
Still adjourned, right? And that one focuses on permitting higher density in the office district, mainly on Hampton Roads and North Sea Road. Am I correct?
Yeah, I
That's
don't.
right.
Yeah, Alex, correct me if I've got this wrong, but it basically allows residential use in the HRO and OD districts. It allows, I believe, also a bonus if you are at 100% workforce housing. Is that right, Alex? A 20% density bonus? Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah,
Yep.
that sounds about right.
And the modification last night was to repeat what had been mentioned before, which was an increase from 25 to 50% requirement. And then more significantly, even than that, was to propose, I believe, to make that split not in terms of the number of units, but the GFA, the total GFA. So if you're building a 3,000-foot structure, let's say you're building get some better numbers. Let's suppose you're building a 6,000 square foot structure, and you were previously going to build six market rate condominiums and 2 workforce housing. You might have split that GFA 80-20 or even more, 90-10 possibly, because the workforce units would have been much smaller. So the proposal, the additional modification last night was to say that 8,000 square foot structure would now be required to have 4,000 square feet of market rate and at least 4,000 square feet of workforce housing, which I know one of the principles in workforce housing is to have some larger units than what had been thought about typically, so that young families and multiple people in a family unit can live in essentially a decent sized apartment. But in an 8,000 square foot project, if you had 2,000 square foot condominiums, you might have 4 1,000-foot on average workforce housing apartments. So that's where that proposal was modified to and then re-adjourned for future discussion and potential other options.
I have a question. Specifically, if I'm a developer and I'm facing a choice, and the village code tells me that to get to higher density, I have to do 25% workforce housing or 50% workforce housing, or as some people said last month, 100% workforce housing. If I'm a developer and the only thing I look at is money and my return on investment, there must be a calculation that I'm facing saying, well, if I'm forced to do 50%, it makes no money, I'm just not going to build, which is exactly what's happening, I think, in other villages.
In Sag Harbor, yeah.
Sag Harbor, right? So by being greedy in a way and demanding more of a percentage in workforce housing, the result is you get nothing at all.
Well, Sag Harbor hasn't been greedy, though. Sag Harbor is very modest. I think they're 20%, Alex. It's modest, because 10% is already required by the county for any multifamily development. You have to buy under...
My question specifically is, has anybody done a spreadsheet to understand from a developer standpoint what percentage yields a IRR advantage to accepting the deal and wanting the higher density deal and in exchange for more workforce housing? Where is that number? Because we do 25%, we do 50%, but I've never seen a real developer view on it, and I'm afraid that we're throwing this percentages up there, hoping it's going to stick, but nobody has done the numbers.
Well, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. We need something definitive enough to do the numbers. We could do it hypothetically on what's proposed now. But do keep in mind, while it's a much more limited pool, there are developers, some of them basically 501c3 organizations, that will do this not in search of a profit, or to the extent that they retain a profit, it has to go back into their operations. And the way that they've done this is to rely on grant funding at the state and county and local levels. So there are developers who will do this. I can't answer the question of why it hasn't happened in Sag Harbor. I don't know if, Sag Harbor is a different layout to us. It's a little denser, and frankly, there are fewer places where people could even consider doing this in Sag Harbor. But I'm not sure that that's been the limiting factor for them. I don't know. You're right. With any law we propose, we have the risk of either underwhelming developers or being too attractive to them and having too much density. And I can guarantee whatever we do, we're going to get a version of one of those a little bit. We're going to get less than we thought or more than we hoped for.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
Rob, last Thursday, whenever it was, a month ago,
Yeah.
one of the participants was a developer, if I
Yes,
recall, in East
correct.
Hampton, right?
And he had a different model. And his model, I've reached out to him, but I haven't heard back. His model was more interesting. And he alluded to some of the finances, but he didn't go into it entirely. He does not take any state money. It wasn't clear to me whether he takes any basically community housing fund money. I don't think he did. And his model was basically, first of all, he said, I don't care if I'm making the same profit that another developer might. So he was looking for some return, but he wasn't looking to maximize his return, to Michelle's point, of what many developers will. So he already had a bit of a public good and altruistic streak in him. But his model was to basically raise most of his upfront money, the equity in the project, really, through local businesses who wanted to reserve one or more units for their use. So he basically pre-sold units to local businesses that would otherwise be going out to rent a house for some of their employees, so that they would have one or two units in his development. And I didn't quite run the numbers, but my impression was that he probably raised $2 to $3 million to seed this project based on those pre-sales. And then, back to combine both of your points, he did say, but he wasn't specific on the math, that he wasn't looking to do what many developers do, which is put as much cash in their pockets as possible. He came at this with an idea that the village needed more workforce housing. He had the skills to do it. He had an interest in doing it. He thought it was good for the community, and he could make a little money along the way. We may have people like that. To partially answer Michelle's question, we may be surprised to know that there's some people in Southampton Village. I don't want to name names, but it's my understanding that we have a resident in the village who has purchased 3 buildings on Main Street, renovated them entirely, including the apartments up top, solely basically for the purpose of housing members of his domestic team, the employees who help him run his house. And I don't believe he is making any kind of market return on the rent. So, there are different motivations for different people here in this village that we may not be relying on the marginal profit-driven developer to make this happen.
Okay.
Got it. That's helpful.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to throw out, if I could, because I don't see a need to throw a lot of ideas against a wall, and I certainly don't want to draw out a process, because I'd rather start with something we reasonably believe could work, and if it did work, would be good, and then we can monitor and modify if we need to. But I did want to talk, to me, there are 4 sort of avenues to go down, and Alex, please interrupt if you've dealt with these with Noah or on your own, and you want to cut short any conversation on any of these. But there's the current proposal as modified, as described. There is, in my opinion, an interesting opportunity to look at owner-occupied businesses, not just in the OD and HRO, but throughout the village, basically, to say that if you have a lease on a property and run a business from it, or if you own a property and run a business from it, that we might want to consider giving them essentially the same 20% density bonus for the purpose of building or converting existing buildings or buildable footage on their properties to house their employees only. A lot of people have some issues with this for social and other reasons, but and I haven't talked to a lawyer to know the legality. I do know enough to know that, interestingly enough, that would take those units out of some of the limitations that come along with fair housing laws, because it's no longer a market unit. In fact, we could have a deeded restriction saying it can not be occupied by anyone other than an employee of the business on the property. Now, there's an enforcement issue, but there are with every scheme. So, but because that's not a market unit, it gives you a little more flexibility. It may remove you from some available funding for subsidies down the road, but Community Housing Fund has indicated to me that wouldn't remove you from funding from their program for the development of that. So they would be able to help defray the cost. To me, the interesting thing is that we know we have a good idea of where these would possibly go, and the benefit would be a direct benefit to village businesses, direct benefit. Whereas with everything else we're talking about, because of the need for these to be market units at some level, I don't mean market price, but available to anyone in the market, I believe most of these subsidy programs say that someone has to have a full-time job and work within a reasonable commute of the housing unit. Well, that could mean that we're creating housing that's going to be occupied by someone in East Hampton or Hampton Bays. Now, frankly, from a big picture perspective, it doesn't really matter where they work. As long as they live east of the canal and they work east of the canal, we should have some interest in housing them possibly, because it will help reduce commuter traffic. But all things equal, it would be much better and more helpful for the village if the people living there were workers for the village. So to me, that's a second option to consider. A third option to consider, and Alex and I had only a brief conversation on this, but
Wait, sorry,
yeah.
before you go into the third, you asked Alex for his feedback.
Yeah.
Alex, can you provide feedback on what was just proposed here?
I'm not sure that I'm familiar with if there's a specific proposal.
There's not.
Just
It's
an idea.
just an idea. Yep.
Okay. I mean, the village code provides, at least in our business district, for residential above commercial. The biggest limiting factor there is health department regulations.
It is.
And I should say, even in the other corridors that we're talking about, the health department regulates density at such strict levels that there's virtually no risk of overdevelopment. And that in most densities that we're looking at, may just be unachievable. Based on current health department regulations. So just something to keep in the back of mind when we talk about density.
You're right in that the village business district already does this. So to me, it would be going to all the other districts where businesses exist, maybe not non-conforming businesses in residential districts, but in HRO and OD, and giving those businesses the opportunity to develop workforce housing.
I think that's part of what the current proposal is, where it introduces the opportunity for a live-work unit, where you can have a mixed-use development where the proprietor of the business lives on site. So that is something that's contemplated under the current proposal.
It is. Maybe you and I can meet separately offline. There's some nuances and differences to what I'm contemplating, because while that is allowed under the current proposal, other things are allowed as well, which, look, I'll quote Jay Deasing, and people may disagree. I happen to agree with him on this. He has said we don't need any more luxury housing in Southampton Village, at least not right now. We don't need a single new luxury unit. We need, if we're doing residential, it should be workforce housing. So I think and that gets to Michelle's point about, well, what's the profit motive, or what's the motive for someone to develop that? There was a lot of discussion in the hearing last month about the ability to actually finance this pretty successfully through, if you're willing to do state funding, a combination of state, county, and CHF funding, whether that's direct cash or low interest rate loans. It's possible, for instance, for a developer of 100% workforce housing to get, at this point, Jay said more than 250, and Kara Back, who runs CHF, didn't shake her head. She nodded her head. They would consider, he believes, more than $250,000 in Southampton Village because of the land costs. But as $250,000 as a baseline, if you're talking about let's say an 8-unit development somewhere, which would probably be on the order of 3,000 to 4,500 square feet or so, maybe as much as 5,000 square feet. That would 8 units would get you $2 million. You are also eligible for a loan program from the state where they fund 90% of approved contracts, including at construction rates consistent with our area. They take that into account. That includes a 10% developer fee off the bat. And the interest rate on that is something like 2.4%, I believe. There are some versions of that based on hardship or I don't know the criteria, I'm not a lawyer, but where you can even get no interest loans. But the point, I guess, to Alex or Michelle, going back to your comment, is on a risk-adjusted basis. There's ROI and there's risk-adjusted ROI. It certainly seems to me that there are likely to be scenarios where on a risk-adjusted basis, there are some pretty attractive returns, even for quote-unquote market developers, not 501c3 type organizations, on a risk-adjusted basis, because their downside risk, if essentially most or perhaps all of their land cost is covered, and they're getting 90% financing at 2.4%, that's a lot better than the market, a lot. And they can be quite sure that there will be demand at a lower rent, admittedly, but there will be demand for those units. So, and the demand for the units separately can be subsidized in terms of the rent that's charged. So you can set a modified market rent, and to the extent someone can't pay that, they pay what they can, and CHF in particular can come in and subsidize the difference. So it's a probably good exercise, Michelle, and I'm enough of a math person. I can go in and try to create some spreadsheets to see what that might look like on a very high-level, basic basis. Be willing to spend some time doing that.
Rob?
Yeah.
Sorry, just for the sake of time, because
Yep.
I know we got
Yep.
more on the agenda. We want to wrap this up on the half hour. Let me ask you this, just to be practical about all this.
Mm-hmm.
From the Planning Commission's perspective, and I wish he was here today, we have one guy, Jacob, who is knowledgeable and interested in the topic. He may be willing and able to work with you on
Yeah.
this from the
Okay.
perspective. You may want to put a working group together.
Sure.
I understood that Noah was off the table because he was the consultant, and just from a budgetary perspective.
Yeah. His contracts run up, and yeah.
Right. No, so, yeah, and the fees, et cetera. And we seem to be cheaper than consultants, but do twice the amount of work, but whatever. The point is this, I think Jacob is going to be here next,
Okay.
and you could always reach out to him. And
Yeah.
I'll give you his details. But because he's very knowledgeable in that area, he's expressed interest last time we met on the topic. But and that's what we as a commission could contribute to your work group if you want to have one. But
Great.
all of this is going to take time. You have a proposal on the table. I mean, what's wrong with it? Are we going to adjourn it yet again in December? I mean, what's going to happen between now and December, your next meeting? You guys going to adjourn this again? I mean, why don't you guys just vote on it and move on? And if there's more stuff to do later on out of this work group that's well thought out, go back and finish it up. Don't you think that's a good idea to get at least something on the table?
Well, something is on the table, and honestly, the agenda and the timing, whether something's going to actually be put up for a vote, is I can pound on the table, but my pounding on the table so far on certain things hasn't proved too useful. I would say the following: the concern about simply going with the proposals on the table is that, I think Alex has even said in theory, there are something like 25 to 30 properties that would be eligible for this, I believe, Alex. It's roughly that order of magnitude. And then the question was asked, how many are likely to be developed? And of course, no one knows. And it could be 0, as Sag Harbor has experienced, or it could be more likely, a lot of people think, sort of 3 to 6, something like that, or it could be 12 to 15. And there was a concern, there were 2 concerns. One was that the most attractive properties, the ones that might be most attractive from a moving the needle standpoint, long term, could get snapped up quickly under a scheme that might yield less workforce housing than we otherwise could get. And that opportunity for better use of the property from a workforce housing standpoint would go away. And that might be a deterrent for people doing future projects. That was one concern, that sort of there'd be some cherry picking, and we would get, as a result, argument's sake, 12 great new luxury townhomes and condos somewhere in the HR and OD districts in exchange for 4 or 5 workforce housing units. And that when you do the math, you're housing 4 or 5 workforce members for the sake of developing units that will require 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 full-time people equivalents to take care of them. So you're solving a little bit of the workforce problem, but you're adding to the commute problem. You're not chipping away at the backlog need for workforce housing as significantly as possible, and you may lose some of the best opportunities to chip away. That was one concern. The other concern, frankly, and we can limit this if we wanted to put another thing in that limits the number of building permits in any period of time, which I think gets a little fine-tuned. But there was a concern that you could suddenly have 5 or 6 construction projects on Hampton Road and on Windmill Lane or North Sea Road, with all the attendant deliveries and contractor parking and traffic that comes with it, which is bad enough on the small residential streets, but could be really disruptive to quality of life and transportation in the heart of the village. So, the point is, I think we've taken some time to try to make sure we're not going to overcook something or have essentially a nice giveaway to some very profit-oriented developers with very little net benefit in terms of workforce housing. That's to me, that's the nutshell of why something hasn't moved quickly. But I think we're closer by increasing the percentages and making it based on GFA. I think we get a lot closer, and there were a lot more head nods around the table last night. And I kind of agree with the idea of putting a stake in the sand and seeing how it works. It's harder to, I'm always told if it's not working right or if it's overheating, we can repeal it. It's very difficult to repeal something like this. You can modify it, but frankly, if the modification was over time to try to increase the percentage requirement for workforce housing, that also gets difficult too. You open yourself up to some legal liability. Even though we have the right to do it, there's people who will say that's not fair, they did it, I can do it, there's precedent, blah, blah, blah. We've seen these arguments in land use before. I just want to throw 2 other things out very quickly. There are some interesting possibilities, which I'd love to talk with Jacob and discuss more with Alex. With respect to the block that is bounded by Nugent, Jagger, Windmill, and Main Street, North Main Street. There are some properties in there. We know there's some unused properties in there. And one possibility would, as an alternate or maybe in addition, to do an overlay. That's the VB district, to do an overlay in there that would allow workforce housing development. Yep.
Rob.
Yep.
Sorry, let me stop you there, but for the sake of time, I completely agree with you. And that's why I'm thinking, just sort of generically,
Yep.
you got step 1, step 2, and sort of phase this, or several phases.
Yep.
And Jacob could lend a hand to that, and I know he's keenly interested.
Okay, so I'll deal with, then let me meet
My
with him.
point is,
Yep.
you're gonna have this public hearing opening again just before Christmas when you meet again,
Yep.
and postponing it yet again. I mean,
Okay.
you're not gonna get. I just the feeling I certainly for me as a co-chair of the planning commission, I was listening very carefully last night to all of this. I read the text, I read the revision, I got it. To me, it's like, just get that done,
Yep.
and then work intelligently on exactly that point with the right team. And Jake can help you, Alex can work on it, and just move on that. And that'll help the process to at least put a
Okay.
flag in the sand,
Yep.
and make everybody feel better at least we got something done, and
Yeah.
then work on the other stuff, which I think is really relevant.
There is
It'll
another.
make you feel a
Yeah.
lot better because I heard your ending comments last night. I'm like, okay, hold on, Rob.
Yeah, it's been a tough week, but we
I
don't
know.
need to go into that. The other thing I'll just throw out there, and this could be an additional step, but it's something I want you to be aware of and weigh in either now or over time. We do have this ADU law that went into effect. There's been no uptake in the village on that, which basically allows additional dwelling units in the primary residence, subject to not only a few bells and whistles, which I described last month, but also, frankly, the surrounding language that got put into that gives any board that reviews it, mostly planning board, I think, about 1,000 excuses to say no. Because it says if in the neighborhood or in the vicinity of any possible future use by any other resident might be negatively impacted, that should be considered. Well, I mean, so my
Look, in a nutshell, when Jesse and the team worked on this
Yeah.
at the time,
Yeah.
right, it was all good intent.
I
But
know.
the way it's written, you and I have debated this.
Yeah.
It's way too restrictive. But what's interesting is, Alex will confirm this, is no one came to Village Hall building department and said, I'd like to do it, but could I find an exemption on this? It seems like nobody cares.
Yeah.
And it is just well intent, but you could tweak it till the cows
Well,
come home, ain't the outcome.
East Hampton
That's my-
Village.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to confirm since I've been with the village coming up around 4 years now, we haven't seen a single application for it.
Yeah, the East Hampton, they have a very different law, and there's some different sort of avenues and conditional things to it from what we wrote and from what most villages have. But one of the things they did do in their basic ADU law was to allow ADUs in existing, not new build, existing accessory structures, studios and garages and that sort of thing. And they have had some uptake on it. So the one thought I had on ADUs was to have us consider allowing them in existing structures, subject to, we could still have some of the things in there, like, for instance, subject not to an exterior staircase visible from the street. It needs to be interior staircase or a staircase behind the building. But there are an awful lot of 1.5 and 2-story garages that have,
So you're gonna, yeah.
that have,
You would propose a detached structure to be allowable?
I would, subject to building code and fire code. Yeah.
Here's my recommendation if you went down that path. Take a sounding board, one by one, of your other 4 colleagues on that board, because I am not sure you're gonna get good take-up on that. That's just my off the cuff.
And what
Because I've
what
thought
what
about
do you
it.
think their objections would be?
They don't want an accessory structure on, that's what I'm sort of picking up, but unconfirmed, but that's the sense I got when I brought it up.
Okay.
Or potential revision.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
But you can wrap this into your work group when you work on Nugent. You can add this as a parallel track
Yeah.
to work on that as well.
okay. All right. Well, I will, if
All right,
you
I
can
gotta
send me
move on
Jacob's,
to the next.
yeah, send me Jacob's contact details and I'll
I'm going to do
coordinate.
that right now.
Okay.
Michael, sorry, I'm
Sure.
jumping the gun since Michelle is running a meeting. Michelle, next topic.
Yeah, Michael, anything on your side?
Well, yes, actually, quickly, as far as deer program goes so far this year, the number is now 30 to 35. The weekend numbers aren't fully in as to the amount of deer that we were able to get. And again, village residents, if you are listening, we need more and more properties because the properties we do have, the deer are smart enough to stay away from the history of us culling the herd. And we're only going to be successful if we get more and more new properties. To keep this brief, the tree committee, there's a great article in the Southampton Press today about the trees and the tree replacement that the mayor and the trustees are undertaking right now. I commented to the mayor myself about the trees that they are installing are not these, as Christian likes to say, Charlie Brown trees, but they are of 3 to 4 5-inch caliber trees. Particularly,
Congratulations for replacing that dead one in front of the Presbyterian Church. I thought I wanted to say that.
well, I'm happy the ones that they got over there on Hill Street by across from where Paul's used to be. They've been dead for about 10 years and nothing ever got done. But in any event, we're getting, the tree committee has been working with the mayor and Public Works, and things are starting to progress. And the trees we are installing on Hill Street, Main Street, Hampton Road, are larger, I shouldn't say Hampton Road, Main Street and South Main Street are larger caliber trees. So things are working well as far as that tree committee. Budgetaries, the budget's coming up for Public Works and for all departments come January, February. We're in the process now of trying to put together some sort of budget line for actually tree maintenance for the village. So that's another great step. And Len Zanotti has been great with that. He's been helping us with that. He's liaison on it for the trees, and he's been doing a great job. Other than that, Christian, I want to thank you. I know that Beth's work that you did was arduous, but the way you did it, the way you handled it, and Arnold, Mr. Arnold, you did a fantastic job with that, and I just want to thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
You always thank everybody else, but no one ever thanks you.
That's very nice. Thank you. In fact, I was just going to make reference. But thank you for your comment. I want to thank Mr. Arnold, who's been a good wingman working on this and keeping me on track, along working with Alex on this topic. But let me say this. The Kaylin Riley article in the Southampton Press this week on the trees. She wrote a good article and very thoughtful and did a good job. I know a lot of residents have questions about why are we taking these trees down on critical commercial streets, Job's, Main, and that's because we need to have the best trees we can in our most visible street, in our flagship street. And DPW is doing the best job they can, and they are doing a good job. But what I found amusing in this article, when she was talking about the Tree City USA, which is obviously something that was sponsored and started by the Planning Commission a few years ago. I know since then a lot of people have taken credit for it. That makes me smile, which is fine. But we really have progressed as a community in terms of how the place looks and the caring for the trees. I know you're going to be lobbying for some money to be set in the budget for not just planning, but maintenance. And you're doing a lot of great work on it. So thank you. I'm sure some of our residents who love to come at every board meeting to talk about our taxes are going to be there again as an increase item. But I think that's really throwing good money on a good topic. And I'm sure Len and his rest of his group on the budget and finance are going to find some savings elsewhere. So good luck with that exercise. Thank you for doing it.
Okay, you're welcome. But, it's the trees are one of the things where you can overlook and have been overlooked for years and years and years because it's an easy thing not to spend money on. But, it's come home to roost.
We lost 60 of them the other day when we had 60-mile-an-hour winds, right? Is that what you're telling me?
I thought it was 30. I think
30,
we lost
okay.
30,
Well,
yeah.
It's still a lot of trees.
Right.
It's very dangerous. We did have 3 years ago one tree on a Monday morning, which almost fell on a commuting car on Hill Street.
Mm-hmm.
That's a public safety, as you know, it's my favorite topic.
Right.
That was a big issue there. We have 15,000 trees. 5,000 need to be replaced. 5,000 needs to be taken care of. It is a ton of work, and it's going to take a decade and some to clean up something that the village didn't tend to until it became a Tree City USA 3 or 4 years ago. Neglected for decades. So there's a lot of work. It's going to take we have to be patient. It's going to take time. It's going to tax our people.
Right.
Tax, I mean, the work for our DPW. But this is good stuff. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think we're running out of time and
Running out of topics.
topics and time at the same time. So let's take advantage of this confluence to end the meeting.
I
All
second.
right, well, thank you for the motion. I'll second it. And we'll meet in December, hopefully in person this time around. And I have updates on various topics by then, notwithstanding our water tower.
Yeah, and hopefully we could all get together in this room again sometime.
As I said, we'll
It
do,
would be
make sure we
nice.
do that in
December
Yes, it would
12th.
be nice.
December 12th.
Okay, good, and we'll have a holiday, maybe we'll have
Bye,
a holiday
everybody.
party after that.